I actually worked at a church in California for a number of years called Cornerstone, so I'm used to saying, "What's up, Cornerstone?" Hope you guys are doing well this morning. I'm just excited to be, when Pastor Scott asked me to come and to be with you this morning, I was super excited. I was excited to be here and be able to just open God's Word with you this morning. It's such an honor for him to invite me. And as he was on the phone with me saying, "Hey, so when you come, you're going to need to get some slides ready." And he goes, "You don't have to have as many as me." And his words, he said, "I'm a slide diva." And I was like, okay, all right. But what he doesn't know is I'm competitive. So I took that as a challenge. I was like, oh, really? So he sent me an example of the slides that he used the previous week, and I looked through them, and I realized I would need 7,000 slides in order to have more than him. So he wins. He can have that one. All right, he wins. But man, I'm excited to be here with you guys today. I've been a pastor for the last 15 years at different churches, different contexts, and for the last 4 years, I've been here in Prescott. Absolutely love Prescott. It's been incredible for my family and I. My wife and I, we've been married for 15 years, and together we have 5 kids. We have 5 daughters. So if you see some glitter on me at all throughout any of this, it's just par for the course. That's how I roll, all right? That's just what we do. Also, if you're looking for something to add to your prayer list, I do have 5 daughters, so you can go ahead and do that. But man, for Christmas, we got my youngest. She's 2 years old. We got her some building blocks, like a building block set, and so she's been playing with those religiously. She loves playing with those building blocks, and she goes, "Dad, hey, come down and play with me. Come down and play building blocks." I'm okay. And the set we got her has like the normal blocks, but then it also has like the fancy ones, the pretty ones. All right, the spiral ones you can put like on the edge of the castle and the archways and all of that. And so I get down there and I pull out all the pretty ones to go to build it. And she looks at me and she says, "No." So I go, "You don't want the pretty blocks?" And she goes, "No, these first." And she pulled out the solid big blocks and started building it there. And my first thought was, wow, this kid is so much smarter than me. She must have got it from her mother. But my second thought was this: I wonder how many of us, when it comes to our faith, want to skip the essentials and just put on a show? Just put on the pretty stuff. Just put on the stuff that we want to show other people, but we don't have the essentials down when it comes to living out our faith. See, if you've been with us for the last couple of weeks, we've been going over and we've been in this series called Faith Essentials, the building blocks to live out our faith. The building blocks to live out our faith. And we have to have these foundational building blocks if we are going to live the life that we are supposed to. If we're going to live out this thing that we call our faith, and it's not just something that we show up to on a Sunday morning, but it makes its way into our life, then we have to have these essential building blocks. And if you're here week 1, we talked about Christ being the essential building block. Right? It has to be built on Christ. Right? Christ is the cornerstone. Hello, church name. There it is. It has to be built on Christ. Right, then week 2, we talked about community. You have to be in community. You were created for community. You were not designed and created to be alone. If we're going to grow in this thing we call our faith, we need to be living in community and wrestling with the things of God through the community around us. Right, if we are going to continue to do this, and then last week we talked about this idea of conviction. We have to have conviction. Right, there are things that we have to stand on the truth and say, listen, this is a conviction of mine, and if I'm going to move forward in my faith, then I need this as a building block before I move forward in anything else. Right, and this week we're going to dive into another building block of what it looks like for you to live out your faith. One of the things that I get to do in addition to pastoring is I coach baseball. I've played baseball for a very long time, and I get to coach baseball as well. I coach locally at Embry-Riddle University, and it's been an incredible time being able to coach with them. Our team got our first win yesterday, so come on, local, you can give it up for our team. I'm just saying. We got our first win yesterday. It was amazing. But the hardest part of coaching college baseball is you bring together 38 to 40 athletes that were all good in high school. They were all individually good. And now you say, hey, you're on a team together, and now you got to play together. And that's hard because being together is difficult. And so we're trying to figure out how do we get these guys to be a team? How do we get them to not just care about themselves, but to be concerned for each other? To care about the needs of those around them instead of just themselves. Right, to have this thing called compassion. Right, we as Christians, this should be what marks us. We should have this thing called compassion. Right, this should be a marker so that when someone looks at your life, they go, oh, that person, they're on Jesus' team. They're identified as a team member on Jesus' team because they live a life of compassion. It's a building block that we have to have in our life if we are going to continue to push our faith forward. We have to be able to say, listen, we are people who are compassionate, and that's what identifies us as a part of Jesus' team. Right, we see this in Scripture in Colossians 3, verse 12. It says, therefore, as God's chosen people, holy and dearly loved, clothe yourself with compassion, kindness, humility, gentleness, and patience. Clothe yourself with compassion. Put on the clothes like you would put on your clothes for the day with compassion. Now at my house, clothes are a big deal. Right, five daughters, clothes are a big deal. They have clothes everywhere. We got to have fancy clothes. We got to have pretty clothes. We got to have cool clothes. We got to have clothes. Right, and parents in here, you know that feeling when your kid opens their closet and they look in there and there's clothes everywhere and they go, I got nothing to wear. And you're like, are you for real right now? Like you got stuff coming out your ears, right? But they got nothing to wear. Right, there's a lot of clothes in my household, and for me, I got to be honest, I found what I like to wear when I was like 22, and that's it. Like my style hasn't changed, right? Husbands, you know what I'm talking about? Men in here, right? Wives, you're like, I've been trying for years. Been trying to change his style, right? My wife, she comes to me and she goes, we got to change your style. We got to update it a bit. And I'm like, why? I look awesome. And she's like, you did look awesome in 2008, right? You want to feel old this morning? That's almost 20 years ago, all right? Some of the clothes that I have in my closet actually are from 2008. They were what I was wearing then. My wife really tries to get rid of those, but she tries to update my style. She tries to get me new things. And she says, listen, you need to wear this. You got to update your style. And she got me this right here that I was wearing, and I was going to put this on. I was going to come out without it and then put it on, but they told me wearing black, I would just look like a floating head out here. So I decided to not do that. But here's the thing. My wife can buy me all these new clothes. She can say, hey, I'm going to get you these new clothes, but it's my choice whether I wear them. It's my choice whether I put them on. See, I could stand up here, I could say, listen, if you're going to be marked as a follower of Jesus, if you're going to live out this faith, then you need to clothe yourself with compassion, but it is your choice whether you put it on. It's your choice whether you say, hey, I'm going to put on this thing called compassion. All right, so what does that look like? How do we put on compassion? How do we clothe ourselves with compassion as we head out into a world that is an opportunity for compassion? All right, if you're taking notes, write this down. We have to pray for his eyes. We have to pray for his eyes. Okay, not our eyes. We need to pray for his eyes, because what God sees is he sees opportunities all around us that sometimes we just walk right past. We got to pray for his eyes so that we see the things that he sees. How many remember the first time you were in love? Like the first time you were in love and like everything they did was amazing. It was beautiful. It was perfect. All right, we call that rose-colored glasses. All right, when everything you see is a tint of rose and it's just perfect. All right, some of you students in here, you're living that right now. All right, your parents are like nudging you like that's you. Right? We have this rose-colored tinted glasses and we look at it. Listen, what if we put on God-colored glasses and saw the world around us through the lenses that he sees the world? What if the way that we saw the world was the way that God saw the world? And we saw opportunities everywhere we find ourselves, everywhere in our relationships, everywhere in our jobs, wherever we find ourselves, we see it the way that God sees it, and we start seeing opportunities for compassion. If we're going to clothe ourselves with compassion, we have to pray for his eyes. What if we started our morning with just a simple prayer of, God, give me your eyes to see what you see today? Wherever I find myself, God, what if I just see it the way that you see it? All right, if we're going to clothe ourselves with compassion, then write this down. We also have to make a choice to see. Make a choice to see. How many of you know that there's hearing and then there's listening? Okay, let me ask that a different way. How many of you are married in here? You know what I'm saying? Right? Husbands, your wife will tell you all the plans, every single one, all the plans for the whole week. And then you're like, hey, what are we doing again? She's like, I told you. You heard. but you didn't listen. Right? You heard, but you didn't listen. Right? There's a difference between hearing and there's a difference between listening. Listen, there's a difference between seeing and seeing. There's a difference between seeing something and allowing your visual cortex to take in the image that is in front of you and actually seeing the needs of those around you. There's a difference between seeing and seeing. A lot of times we go around and we see things, but we don't actually see them. So how do we train ourselves? How do we get ourselves to a place where we actually see the things around us? Because if we are supposed to clothe ourselves with compassion and we're walking around and that is who we are, then we need to see the things around us. And listen, it starts by slowing down. Man, we are in such a hurry. We're in a hurry to get the kids where they need to go. We got to go here and drop the one kid off here, and we got to go to the other place. We're in a hurry to get to wherever we need to go. We're in a hurry for the work that we have to do. We're in a hurry for everything in our life. And a lot of times the hurry is what kills the opportunities for compassion. In 1973, at Princeton University, a group of psychologists got together and they did a study on students who were going into ministry. And these students wanted to go into ministry, so they brought them together and they said, what is it that drives you to go into ministry? Why do you want to go into ministry? And they all had the same answer of, I want to go into ministry to help people. It's a great answer. And so what they did is they said, hey, we want you to prepare a sermon on the Good Samaritan. Now, if you don't know the Good Samaritan, it's a story that Jesus told of a man who was mugged, who was beat up, who was left for dead on the side of the road. And as he was left in this ditch in his time of need, people walked past. In fact, not just any people, religious people, they walked past and they saw him, but they didn't see him. And they just kept going. And then finally, this Samaritan man came and he saw him and he had compassion. And he helped him. And he took care of him. And so at Princeton University, they told these students, I want you to write this sermon on this. And you're going to go across campus and you're going to preach the sermon that you wrote on this passage of the Good Samaritan. But what they didn't know is they had paid an actor to be in an alleyway to play someone who had been mugged and beaten up. Laying there in the alleyway as this person was visibly shaken and upset and groaning in pain, these students were to go across campus to preach a sermon on the Good Samaritan. Now, there was a factor in this study that they did is one group, they told them, hey, you need to go and you need to preach this sermon, but you're already late. They're waiting for you and you need to get over there. And they went and they walked right past where this actor was. Now, the other group of students that they sent over, they said, you're going to go across campus and you need to preach this sermon, but you're really early. You have plenty of time, but you should probably head over there now. And the results were this, is the students that they said you were in a hurry, you need to go, only 10% of those students stopped to help the person that was beat up on the side of the road as they were on their way to preach a sermon about someone who helped somebody who was beat up on the side of the road. And of the students who had plenty of time, 63% of them stopped to help the person that was beat up. See, I think that hurry in our life kills the compassion in our life. I think if we get to a place in our life where we can slow down, where we can say, listen, I'm not just here to see it, but I want to actually see it. And we're able to notice those things around us. We're able to live out this building block of faith in our life called compassion. We clothe ourselves with compassion. And we say, God, I want to see through your eyes today. And I'm willing to not just see it, but to see it. And so what does this actually look like? I think in order for us to fully understand this idea of compassion, we have to look at the ultimate example of compassion, which is Jesus. Jesus showed us what compassion is. To set this up, Jesus is in this place where someone came before Jesus named John. And John was Jesus' cousin. And John would go around and he would baptize people. And he would say, hey, I'm preparing the way. Someone greater is coming. And he was foretelling that Jesus was to show up and Jesus was to come. And as Jesus was beginning his ministry and he was walking around, the government of the day was like, okay, we got to get rid of this John guy. And so Herod had John, got him, and threw him in prison. And then through some turn of events, he ended up getting to a place where he killed John. He beheaded John. And this is where we pick up the story here. Jesus finds out the news about his cousin in Matthew chapter 14, verse 13. When Jesus heard what had happened, he withdrew by boat privately to a solitary place All right, you just get the news that your cousin's head was chopped off. You need some time by yourself. This is some time for him right here. Hearing of this, the crowds followed him on foot from the towns. When Jesus landed and saw a large crowd, he had compassion on them and healed their sick. Listen, Jesus didn't feel like compassion. Jesus didn't feel like compassion in that moment. All right, there's none of us in here that would be like, yeah, you know what sounds like a great time for compassion. He just found out his cousin's head got chopped off. He withdrew. He's like, you know what, I need some time right now. I need to take care of this right now. Jesus didn't feel like compassion, but he did it anyway. You know why? Write this down. Because compassion needs to not be something you do, but who you are. It's not just something you do. It's not something you turn on and turn off. It's something that is who you are. When you clothe yourself with compassion, it's not just something you rip off whenever you feel like it. It's not like, okay, yeah, you know what? This is nice. I'm going to clothe myself with compassion here. I got it on. But today's not the day. I'm going to go ahead and take this compassion off right now. This isn't it. Right? That's not how it works. Right? There's no need for a bunch of naked Christians to be running around. We don't need that. We got to keep our clothes on. Right? The only time that's good is if you're my 2-year-old. She apparently thinks that's an appropriate thing to do, run around naked. There's too many Christians running around that have taken off the fact that they clothe themselves with compassion, and they decide when they're going to put it on and take it off. If we're going to follow Jesus, if we're going to say we are a follower of Jesus and we want to build on this building block of compassion, we have to show compassion even when we don't feel like it. Jesus showed compassion because it was who he was. It was who he was. I think sometimes we limit compassion to an activity instead of realizing it needs to be our identity. It's not just an activity you do. It needs to be the identity of who you are. If we're followers of Jesus, our example is Jesus, and that means we live out this idea of compassion, because the truth is there will be times when you don't feel like being compassionate. There will be many times where you don't feel like being compassionate. And compassion becomes really hard, especially when that person that you need to show compassion for believes something different than you. They might even vote different than you. That person that you need to show compassion to, they might even not be nice to you. But Jesus doesn't call us to take it off, take it on. He says, clothe yourself with compassion. And we don't need naked Christians running around. We need you to stay clothed. We need to remember that if God has called us to do this, we got to stay clothed, and we got to bring compassion into every place that we're in, even when we don't feel like it. Because that's who we are. So what is it we're supposed to have compassion for? What did Jesus show compassion for? Matthew chapter 9, verse 35. Jesus went through all the towns and villages, teaching in their synagogues, proclaiming the good news of the kingdom, and healing every disease and sickness. When he saw the crowds, he had compassion on them. Why did he have compassion on them? Because they were harassed and helpless, like sheep without a shepherd. Sheep without a shepherd, you know what they are? They're lost. When sheep don't have a shepherd, that means that they're wandering. That means that they are lost. Listen, write this down. We must have compassion for the lost. We have to have compassion for the lost. Jesus had compassion for the lost. Jesus walked around and Jesus ate with sinners. Jesus went into places that people looked and they go, I don't know, they're pretty disreputable over there. I wouldn't go there if I were you. And Jesus said, no, that's where I'm going to show up. That's where I'm going to go. Jesus went and he ate with sinners. Jesus called tax collectors and said, hey, be my followers. Come with me. Jesus was with crowds who were lost without a shepherd, and his compassion came out, and he said, I have compassion for them. I have compassion for them because they're lost. Listen, church, we need a compassion for the lost. In fact, Jesus cared about this so much. Jesus cared about this so much that as he gave us his final instructions, that's what he talked about. When I leave the house, my older ones are old enough to take care of the younger kids now. And so when I'll leave the house and I'll leave them home, I always leave them with final instructions. Okay, listen, the food is on the counter. That's what you're going to eat for dinner. Do not open the door for anyone. I don't care who it is. Don't open the door. Okay? All right? Don't let the 2-year-old take over the house. Already, bye, and slam the door, right? But I got to give them final instructions before I leave. And this is what I want them to remember because it's the last thing I tell them. Jesus, as he spent his time on this earth, he talked about a lot of things. But as he was ascending to heaven, the resurrected Jesus is leaving. He's ascending to heaven on Mount Arabel. He's speaking to them. And what does he say to them? He says, hey, listen, all authority on heaven and earth has been given to me. So you better listen now. He says, I want you to go and make disciples. Do you notice what he didn't say? He didn't say, I want you to hunker down right now. Just find all the Christians and hunker down. That's what I want for you. No, he said, I want you to go. And I want you to make disciples. But the truth is that in the church, oftentimes we get this backwards. And we just like to shut out the evil world and just hunker down with just us who believe and realize, oh, no, we just got to huddle up here. This is our holy huddle. This is the people that I want to be with. But that's never what Jesus called us to. His final instructions for us is saying, listen, if you're my followers, you will have compassion. And if you are my followers, then what you will have compassion for is the lost people around you. Just go and make disciples. There was an interesting study done a few years ago where they talked with churchgoers. Not Joe Schmo on the street, not random people who don't know Jesus, but churchgoers. And they asked them if they knew the Great Commission. The Great Commission is the statement that Jesus just made. Go and make disciples. And he asked of churchgoers, do you know what the Great Commission is? 51% of churchgoers, not Joe Schmo, churchgoers, had never heard of it. Never heard of it. 25% had heard of it, but they didn't know what it meant. They're like, I'm not sure what it means. I've heard it before. 6% said that they were unsure. They were honest enough to say, I don't know, I guess I'm unsure. And only 17% knew what the Great Commission was. Jesus, what he was concerned about, what he had compassion for, was people that were lost. And he's saying, go. He's saying, get out there. He's saying, tell people about me. He's saying, there are people in your lives that if I'm going to clothe myself with compassion as a follower of Jesus, and there's opportunities in my life, whether it's on the baseball field, whether it's at the grocery store, whether it's my neighbor, wherever it is that I find myself, my call is to have compassion for the lost. And what that means is telling them about Jesus. It means telling them about Jesus. It means, hey, come check it out. I want to invite you to church. Statistics show that most people would come to church if they were just invited. But how many times do we walk past an opportunity for an invite instead of having compassion for the lost? Right? Compassion for the lost means a heart to seek the lost and wanting them to have a relationship with Jesus. I know this is a tough statement to say. I'm going to get in your business a little bit right here. I always think it's a little wild when people who say, I'm a follower of Jesus, have friends or close people in their life that they would say that they love, but they have never told them about Jesus. Because essentially what you're saying, if you haven't told them about Jesus, you can't say you love them. In fact, you hate them, because what you're wishing for them is to live life separated from God forever. If you love them, then you will tell them about Jesus. You will allow the spirit of compassion for the lost to permeate your life so much that every situation you find yourself in, you're in a space where Jesus, doing exactly what Jesus did, and have compassion on them. To say, hey, I want you to come into a saving relationship with Jesus. Because for us, we understand what that means. We understand the hope that comes in Jesus. We understand the peace that passes all understanding. We understand what it means. And man, we live in a world that desperately needs it. We live in a world that desperately needs it. If you don't know, just turn on the news. Right? There's never like, all right, at 10 o'clock tonight, some wonderful things happened. Tune in at 10 tonight, the world's going to hell. That's what it's more like, right? We live in a world that desperately needs it. And we have an opportunity to show compassion to those around us. Jesus also had compassion for many other things, and we see in Matthew chapter 15, verse 29. Jesus left there and went along the Sea of Galilee. He then went up on a mountainside and sat down. Great crowds came to him, bringing the lame, the blind, the crippled, the mute, and many others, and laid them at his feet, and he healed them. The people were amazed when they saw the mute speaking, the crippled made well, and the lame walking, and the blind seeing. and they praised the God of Israel. Jesus called his disciples to him and he said, I have compassion. There it is, Jesus having compassion again for these people. What is it that he has compassion for? It's because they have already been with me 3 days and have nothing to eat. I'm telling you, I would not make it 3 days. He said, I don't want to send them away. I don't want to send them away hungry or they may collapse on the way. They have not eaten anything. Write this down. We must have compassion for the needs of those around us. We must have compassion for the needs of those around us. Listen, there are very practical needs around you. Very practical needs all around us. And again, if we have his eyes and we make a choice to see, then we will see the single moms around us. We will see the single moms that are struggling to raise their kids, that are struggling to make ends meet. We will see those around us. If we have his eyes and we will see the families that need a meal, that need groceries dropped off at their house. They're doing everything that they can, but they have a need. Jesus had compassion for their needs, and if we have his eyes, then we will see that family that's struggling. If we have his eyes, we will see the areas in your church that need you to step up and serve. Listen to me, there are areas right now in your church that need you to step up and say, listen, I'm willing. It might not even be what I love doing, but I'm willing to step in because I see the need around me, because what are we supposed to have compassion for? The needs of those around us. Listen, through our church, through this body right here, you can make an impact on those around us. We can care for those around us. We can have compassion for the needs of those around us. All right, so the challenge is this. Step up. Step up and step out. It's real easy to come to a Sunday service to sit here and to go, okay, this is great. I loved it. Sounded great. The guy made me laugh a couple times. It was awesome. Right? The light shined off his bald head really nicely. That's it. It's easy to say that. It's a lot harder to take what we talk about and make it a part of your life. Step up. Step out. Jesus never called us to sit back. He said, listen, I have these essential building blocks, and this is how you're going to live your faith. And you're going to live your faith by putting these building blocks into practice. And you need to make sure it's built on Christ. You need to have community, and you need to have conviction, and you need to have compassion for those around you. So what does it look like? It looks like being generous with what God has given you. We've been given so much. We are so blessed. It's being generous with your time. With your time. We fill our time with so many things, but I wonder how much of that time that we fill is for us and how much of it is for others and for Jesus. What if we took an inventory of our time and we're willing to say, I want to be generous with my time, and I want to step out and I want to be able to serve the needs of the people around me with the time that I've been given? With our talent. With the talent that you have. I grew up in a household where we didn't have very much. We were pretty poor. We had a one-bedroom house, and my parents slept in the living room. My sister and I shared the one bedroom, and so we didn't have much to give to anyone else. And so I remember growing up just thinking, man, we can't be generous. And it wasn't until I was older and I realized my dad is a guy that can fix anything. He's a mechanic. He worked in construction. He can fix anything. I'm on the opposite side of that. When I was little, I was a little kid trying to put the square peg in the round hole, right? My parents are like, oh, we got a special one, right? Like that's not me. That was my dad, man. He could fix anything. And it was so routine in our household for me to come home and be like, where's Dad? And find out that my dad had gone to help someone, had gone to fix something, was at someone's house. In fact, my dad recently retired. And I asked my mom last week, I said, how's Dad been doing? And she goes, I don't know, I don't really see him very much. He's out helping people. What's your talent? What has God gifted you with that a lot of times doesn't fit in the box of church? And so we go, oh, no, I can't help. Because being compassionate for the needs around us means taking the talent that God has given us and using it for Him. Right? It's being able to be compassionate with our our finances, with what God has blessed you with. Listen, we are rich. Some of you are like, no, I'm not. Oh, we are. We have 3 meals a day, you're rich. You live in a house, you're rich. In fact, some of you have a house for your cars. You call it a garage. You're rich. We live in Prescott, Arizona. Man, we're blessed. We're blessed. You have an opportunity to take what God has blessed you with and look around and say, listen, because I clothe myself with compassion, because I have his eyes, because I'm willing to see and not just see, but to actually see, I'm willing to step out and to have compassion for the needs of those around me, and I'm willing to take what God has given me and use it for him. Because when we follow Jesus' example, we get to be the hands and feet of Jesus to people. You get to be the hands and feet of Jesus to people. How do I know that? I know that because I found myself about a decade ago without a job myself. I didn't have a job. I didn't have an income. I didn't have a way to support my family, to support my kids. And I had friends who all got together. And they started making up jobs, doing yard work. I'm like, I'm pretty sure you guys can do this. And they're like, no, we can't do that. But you can. And when I had needs, they stepped in with compassion. See, I know because I was living in a very expensive area on a pastor's salary, and sometimes it was hard to put food on the table. And there was a man named Roland who would show up to our door with a box of groceries every week. And I would say, Roland, you don't have to do this. And he says, I know I don't have to. But Jesus was compassionate for the needs of those around him. And so here you go. I don't know what needs are around you. I don't know where God has uniquely placed you. But I know that God has uniquely called you to have compassion for those around you. But here's the thing. Listen to me. Write this down. You will never have compassion like Jesus until you have a relationship with Jesus. You're never going to have compassion like Jesus unless you have a relationship with Jesus. It says in 2 Corinthians 1:3, praise be the God and Father of our Lord Jesus Christ, the Father of compassion and the God of all comfort. The Father of compassion. If we're going to be compassionate, man, I would love to plug into the Father of all compassion. That sounds like the place to be, the Father of all compassion. Man, he could help me be compassionate. Listen, the Bible says there's only one way to the Father, and it's through Jesus. If you're going to plug into the compassion of the Father, it happens through Jesus. How's your relationship with Jesus? Are you someone who just shows up to church and knows about Jesus, or do you have a relationship with Jesus? Have you taken a step to say, listen, I will put my faith and I want to put my trust in Jesus because of what he did for me on the cross, because he is the only way for me to be saved? Maybe that's you today. Maybe you need to step in and say, I want to put my faith and trust in Jesus for the first time. Maybe you're going, been there, done that, Todd, many, many years ago. But it's time to tighten up the bootstraps. It's time to come back to Jesus. It's time to build on Jesus, because if he is the building block, if Christ is what we start with, and we say, listen, if I'm going to live this life, if I'm going to live out my faith, it's essential that I have Jesus. It's essential that I have community. It's essential that I have conviction. And it is essential that I have compassion. But what did it start with? It all started with Jesus. So where are you at with Jesus today? What steps in your life do you need to take to get closer to Jesus today? Because if we're going to be like Jesus, we need to have compassion for the lost. We need to have compassion for the needs around us. And we need to start using his eyes to see a world that is in desperate need of him. Let's pray. God, thank you so much that you sent your son to give us an example of what compassion looks like. God, thank you so much for every single person in this room, God, for the gifts and the talents that you have given them. Lord, for the opportunities that you've placed in their life. God, for all of the things that you are doing to prepare opportunities for them to have compassion. God, I pray over each one of us, Lord, that we would have your eyes. God, that you would give us your vision to see the needs of those around us. God, that you would allow us to step in. God, I thank you that you have placed each one of these individuals around people who are lost. And God, I pray that you would allow them to be your light. God, I thank you that you have placed each one of these individuals around people who have needs. God, I pray that you would stir in them a heart of compassion to reach the needs of those around them. But ultimately, God, I pray that we would make your relationship with you first and foremost. We love you, Jesus. We pray all of this in your name.